One thing that's been making it into my gear list that I'm taking more and more to the mountains is a little paper journal and a pen. This has allowed me to plan effectively, to capture great memories and learn a great deal about my mind and my body through the process of through hiking or mountaineering or whatever the trip is. It's also a really handy thing to keep in a first aid kit. I'll be explaining a little bit more about that towards the end of the video. This is not something I see on gear lists very often, so I thought it'd be worth sharing a video about it to give you some ideas and some inspiration so you can put pen to paper, and hopefully it'll be as rewarding for you as it has been for me. Let's get into it. So there's always things that I need to keep a record of when I'm out on trail, especially if it's through hiking. Now, of course, you can do this on your phone, but for me, when I'm outside, the last thing I want to be looking at is my phone. So having a paper journal and a pen pulls me away from that, and it really gets me into a more creative space when I'm sitting in a tent and, you know, tucked up in my sleeping bag. It's just a nicer way to spend an evening rather than watching Netflix on my phone, for instance. And this is something that I've really enjoyed, just spending 10 or 15 minutes every night, just jotting down some notes from the day, some ideas, some thoughts, some details of my trip. And the things that I write down can generally fit into these 4 categories. Firstly, there's the basics, there's memories, mindset, and then life-saving information, which is the first aid stuff. We're gonna get into that last. Very important. So the basic stuff that I record every day is pretty obvious. It's the daily miles, the camp locations, the ascent and descent, any observations I made throughout the day number, so how many days on trail, and the total amount of kilometers for the trip so far. So that's really the hard data. And then I have a small journaling section at the top, which I'll get into a little bit later. So you can grab this data either from your guidebook or from your GPS or your watch or whatever, jot it down in your notebook, and it can be really satisfying to just look at that throughout the day, note how many kilometers you've done, how much ascent and descent you've done. And this can also be really helpful to help you gauge later on in the trip what you're capable of. You know, if you did a 38-kilometer day with 1,800 meters of ascent and descent, then it's very likely that you'll be able to do a little bit more than that in a week or so's time when you've built up a little bit of trail fitness. So that comes in handy later on when you're trying to figure out how many days you'll still be on trail. On the GR11 trip, I had to give my family about a week's notice for them to be able to pick me up. So doing those little calculations and figure out how many days I had left on the trail was really helpful for them and to me to know exactly how many days I had left on trail. And obviously things can go wrong with that, but having a plan on paper is a really good start. So that's what 90% of my notebook looks like, just a short paragraph for the day and some of those key details. And I make sure that once I'm done doing that page, I prepare my next page just to make it a little bit easier for me the next day. So the second category of things I take notes on is basically memories. And this is usually what makes up that paragraph or maybe the previous page of things that I've written the night before. So some ideas around this are wildlife, people I've met, places of interest along the way, any weather notes, any good meals or snack ideas that I came up with or saw other hikers doing. I can make note of that, and when I review my journal, that becomes really handy in the planning for my next trips. This is a great place to start with note taking. It's a great way to create those memories. You know, photos and videos can only do so much. If you've got actual notes of thoughts and observations throughout your time during that day, then that can build a really rich memory and a great picture of what you went through on that certain day. But where I find note-taking or journaling gets a lot more rewarding is on this next level, which is the mindset category. So the things that fall into this mindset category are thoughts and feelings that I observed having throughout the day, as well as my main 3 things that I journal just about every day, which is something I'm grateful for, some kind of affirmation, as well as what would be great to happen today, or if you're journaling in the evening, what would be something great that could happen tomorrow. And this could be a bit challenging at first because you could get through the day and realize that, wait, I didn't really observe anything that I was thinking or feeling throughout the day. I was just stuck in my own head throughout the day. So getting to this point at the end of the day, it really reminds you that, okay, maybe I need to pay a little bit more attention to what's going on. This has been a really powerful learning experience for me to understand whether I was just kind of stuck in my own head throughout the day as all these things were happening, or was I actually kind of conscious and presently watching these things happen as they occurred and appreciating them and fully pulling the joy out of the moment rather than just thinking about my Instagram account or thinking about getting some great photo or what I'm going to have for lunch later. This little piece of paper and a pen is really like a doorway to show you how rich the experiences in your life can be, whether you're out hiking or not. And this is something that has been really helpful for me on so many levels throughout my life, not just in the mountains. So I hope that helps. I'm not going to delve into this stuff too deeply because it can get a little bit loopy. So let's just get into the final category, which is probably the most important one, and that is this life-saving tool that you have as a notebook. So some of these things are just ideas that you may want to implement, and others, depending on your situation, could be really important life-saving information, particularly in the event of a first aid or emergency situation. So you can record your water intake throughout the day, especially if you're in a hot environment, that can be useful. Your medical intake or your nutrition intake. You know, if you happen to be a little bit forgetful, this could be really helpful. When I'm in really high altitude environments, I'll be keeping an eye on my blood saturation as well as anyone else that I'm responsible for if I'm in a guiding situation, and then recording heart rate as well as breathing rate and any other factor that might be important for that person. One of the most important things that I learned from my wilderness first aid course, and one thing that's really stuck with me, is how important record taking is when you're treating someone. Realistically, if something goes wrong in the outdoors, there's very few ways that you can actually help someone other than getting real help. But one thing you can do, which can be really important information for EMTs when they arrive, is taking some basic notes on the condition of the person. So some of the basic things are the time that the incident happened, you record that, and then you start taking some basic information from that person as you are sitting with them, as you're comforting them and waiting for the emergency services to arrive. And this is going to help you understand whether their condition is improving or worsening. So some basic data points that you might be able to collect as a first aid provider: the person's pulse rate, their response, whether they're conscious and awake and able to respond to you, their body temperature, their blood oxygen saturation, if you've got a reader handy, and you probably should do if you're at high altitude, and their breath rate, so how many breaths they're taking each minute, and observations, so any other thing that you notice that might be useful for EMTs when they arrive. And this is just an example. This could be completely different depending on what situation you're in. If you're interested in this, then I'd really recommend going to do a wilderness first aid course. This kind of information can be super valuable. You know, hopefully you'll never have to use it, but one day you might have to. I've been in the unfortunate situation of having to give CPR in real life, actually doing chest compressions, and I'm just super glad that I had the knowledge and the information that I was confident in doing that. Unfortunately, we didn't succeed, but it was nice to know that we did our best and we did all that we could. We didn't have time to take notes in that situation. The helicopter was there in 15 or 20 minutes, but if a rescue takes longer than say half an hour, taking some notes on the stats of that person can be super helpful for you, for them, and for the emergency services. So always bring a notebook. So if this journaling thing is something you're interested in implementing in everyday life, if you've tried and failed before, if you're not sure how to start, I've got a 14-day journaling course on Just Coach. So you can see what my app looks like, you can get the journaling prompts and read a little bit about how I've been able to implement this in my life, and some tips and some prompts and just things to help you get started. If you want to check that out, you can see it in the first link in the description. So I hope I've inspired the note taker within you. If you are a note taker already, then let me know in the comments what you take note of. I'm really looking forward to reading the comments actually and seeing if this is a regular practice, and if so, what you're taking note on. But yeah, have a look around, like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you like what you see. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the summit. Also, thanks for the tip about the reflective side. I'm sure that will come in handy. No one likes a sweaty back.